It starts by e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. And ladies and gentlemen, you've entered into the Petrov defense opening. And that's what you are going to be looking at in this video. So in this position, there are two popular responses, which is knight takes e5 and d4. So you're going to firstly look at knight takes e5, which is the most popular. In this position, please do not copy white, because there are going to be consequences after white just brings the queen out and you lose your queen. So you already see this discovered attack on your queen and your king is in check. So please do not do that. Instead, after knight takes e5, you should kick out his knight. When his knight escapes, then you finally take the pawn. And in this position, there are two popular responses, which is queen e2 and d3. So you're going to start to look at queen e2. After queen e2, you're going to actually notice that your position is going to be much more comfortable. So let me show you how. Here you just bring out your queen, and if he kicks your knight out, you just bring your knight back. If your opponent decides to trade off queens, then good with you, because he also has to develop his bishop and castle. And as you notice, this position is quite similar, right? It's more like you're copied each other. Yeah, that's the nature of this opening. So in this position, it's just going to be that well. And I think you're going to have a good time playing in this position. Just kidding. It's going to be pretty boring, but at least you get a draw. So, okay, let's look at another response here. After knight takes e4, this one, g4. Your opponent plays d4 to take much more space and a better initiative in the center. But instead, you stop his expansion by playing d5 and also creating outposts for this knight. So here, white you have to trade off your knight. So he has to develop his bishop. And here in this position, you continue development with bishop to e7. Yes, bishop to e7. You're just wondering why I was just acting surprised, because most of you want to pin most of the time, but here you're preparing to castle as black and you have a solid opening. After all, it's to cancel out the Italian, the fried liver. That's the whole point of the Petrov defense. So here, your opponent castles, you continue your development. And if your opponent puts his rook in the center, which is very popular, because you know the rook must have a very powerful open file in this position, that's when you develop your bishop. Why now? Because the opponent might want to take your knight. And you're going to actually notice that after this trade-off, your opponent has got one extra pawn. But you can recover it by just taking his knight. But you might just say, won't the queen take? Yes. And remember this weakened pawn that was attacked by two pieces? Yeah, you can now just take it. And the good thing about this move is that it's got a team. Because if the queen makes a silly move, maybe here, then yeah, this rook is doomed. So the best move for the queen here in this position is to go back, and you just go back too. And you're actually going to have a good solid position here, and it's going to be pretty equal. So in this position, as you've already seen the consequences, but you're just saying, what if my opponent takes with a pawn? Then bet for him. Why? Because you've got this move. You've got f5. So him or her, if they decide they have a choice, they can bring back the rook, or they can try to be funny and bring their rook here. And there are consequences for that move. Why? Because you can just cast. And as you already see by the arrow, that's the next move. That's the killer move. Because the rook will have no way to go. So as you can already see, you'll be already winning. Okay, let's go back. Let's go back. Most of the times your opponent isn't gonna take. The opponent is going to play a reasonable move, like here, defending this pawn. That's the best move according to the ancient. Was this pawn, I told you that in many ways it's weak and black is going to end up taking it. So it's defending this pawn so that this trade can make sense in the future. So in this position, as you already see, he has defended this pawn so that he can trade off. You have to also defend your knight so that when you trade off, yeah, you have the advantage. So in this position, playing a move like here, like h3, is actually useless because the bishop can retain. And if g4 is played, you can just trade off and you're going to end up with an advantage. So in this position, what white most likely going to play is queen here. And a lot of you're going to be shocked because this move is that putting pressure on this pawn and this pawn. These two pawns are under pressure. But this one is under less pressure because the queen is defending. And here the white queen tries to control this diagonal because that's where the king is castling. But you still castle. You got the balls, you got the guts. And here, white can decide to play this more mature move, which is pretty good. Like knight to d2 is pretty good. It's defending the knight here. Or your opponent can try to fall for the bait. This is what you call bait. Why is the evil bar rising? Because here in this position, you might think that it's rising because you've got a rook that is coming here. No, you've got a rook that is coming to f6. And the bad thing about a rook being developed here is it coming here and you trade off. Remember, you're black, and remember your bishop can also come here. So it can be pretty deadly. So here you're going to actually notice that if your opponent develops the knight, you kick out the queen, and there are many good moves like this one. There is there is knight takes d2, bishop takes d2, bishop takes f3. And when the dust settles, then rook takes b2. Yes, these are the moves that have been recommended by the engine. Two of your rooks have already penetrated. They can be discovered attack here, and you're completely butchering white. So as you can already see, there are consequences for the queen taking this pawn. So that's not the most popular move. So in this position, after this, let's just say the queen doesn't take and this knight is developed, defending the other knight. King to h8 is played. And I guess it will be safe to assume that you have a wonderful position. Okay, now that you've looked at what happens after knight takes e5, let's look at the other response, which is d4. Here in this position, you just take the pawn. Now you can finally take on the center wire, because if the queen comes here, it's absolutely useless. Let me just show you. If the queen comes here, you can just play d5. Yeah. So there's nothing special. So here, most likely, white won't even bother. White is just going to take with the knight. This knight takes e5 or d takes e5. Still the same. If the knight takes, you still play d5. And you're actually going to have a similar position. And you can develop your bishops and castle. So I think it's going to be much more easier to play this opening using this variation and after this response, because it's just going to be normal. You're going to neutralize each other and you're going to have quite an equal position. Your opponent won't have an attacking advantage, so it's going to be quite well for you. And if your opponent takes by the pawn, still the same thing. You can just play the same move And if it takes, you take by the bishop. If he attacks your knight, your knight returns to c5, and they are going to end up in a position like this where you have both castled, and you can trade off the knight for the bishop and have two bishops on the board. So it's pretty important. It's very important to trade off this white bishop and your opponent to be completely powerless against you. So guys, that's all for the Petrov defense right now. Like and subscribe to my channel.